Finally got the Bronco running good enough to make an update video on the LS swap situation. Is it worth it to LS swap your OBS Bronco or F-150, whatever? Short answer, yes. And I'll list out, I'm gonna try to give a price estimate on what it costs to do it, which is not gonna be the same for everybody, but it'll be pretty close. Also gonna do MPG, power, the ease of fixing things on the LS versus a 5.0 small block Ford. This is the current state of it. As you can see, it's not totally complete. I still have, you know, alternator wire I need to do something about. That's just kind of hanging out there. I did upgrade my battery to Excess Power D6500. I had that original alternator that came with the engine went out, but I had a spare. Had to throw that on. This air intake is not permanent. A lot of stuff needs to be cleaned up under here, but for now, it runs and drives good enough to get me around, get me to work, whatever. I did have some issues. It wasn't just drop it in and start driving every day. Initially, there was a few different things. It was down on power. It was running on 6 cylinders. The injectors were bad. I had to get new injectors. Then I had to get it retuned for the new injectors because the original tune I got was for stock truck injectors, and I didn't know it, but it had flex fuel injectors in it. And when I found out I had dead cylinders, that's when I found out I had flex fuel injectors. Had to get a new set, had to get it retuned. Luckily, the tuner that I used didn't charge me for, he didn't charge me to retune it. He just tuned it for the flex fuel injectors, and that was it. And even after that, it still was down on power. And I had a little O2 sensor issue, blah, blah, blah. It was good enough to get me to work, but it was way down on power. Now I finally got it to a point where it is doing pretty good. It's got, I think, all the power. Today, after this little clip I film, I'm gonna try to do a draggy run on it, and I'm gonna put in a comparison of the draggy run with the stock setup versus the draggy run with this setup. And it was brutally slow with the 5.0 in it, so it's definitely faster now. We'll see what the data shows, but otherwise it seems to be running pretty decent. I did end up getting the exhaust kind of situated. Initially it was running with just the Y pipe dumped, so basically no mufflers on it, and I'll put a clip into the idle of that. It sounded pretty good at idle, but I got it running again. Driving around, it sounded terrible. So I got 2.5-inch resonators after the exhaust manifolds, and then I have tied back into the exhaust that was on the Bronco when I had it before, which was old and kind of rotted out. I don't know what the muffler is. Put an idle clip in of it when it was basically open header. I'll put an idle clip in it of it now. We'll do a comparison of that, and then I'll have a comparison video of the old draggy run versus a new draggy run. So far, I'm pretty happy with it. It's only 2-wheel drive. I still have to do a front drive shaft. I have to reroute the exhaust. I have to do transfer case shifter and all that stuff, but for now it's good enough to drive me around, get me to work, stuff like that. So I'm happy with how it's performing as of right now. Like I said, I still have a ton of things to go through and update and clean up, and still need some work, but this video will be a good enough comparison to show, you know, whether it was worth it or not, which again, it is worth it because it's more power, gas mileage is better, all that stuff. So in this video, I'll post price estimate, I'll post gas mileage before and after, and I'll post a draggy run before and after, and just give you my initial thoughts on how this thing's running and is it worth it or not. Also, I got the stock shifter to work. It's not the greatest situation because when it's in park, the shifter linkage on the transmission is almost totally sideways. So to get it out of park, it's kind of hard, but once it's out of park, it shifts through the gears fine. But I'll probably end up changing that. I'll probably go with some type of different shifter or something, just because I feel like putting this much stress on it, coming in and out of park, it just is eventually going to break, and I don't want any failure points on this thing. But I'll fire it up and we'll see a little idle clip. I don't have the RPM gauge working. I don't have coolant pressure or coolant temp, and I don't have oil pressure yet. But I'm working on getting that stuff situated. Let's see what it sounds like. And no, that's not my leak. So with all that being said, I'm gonna take this thing over to a little secret private spot and see if I can get a draggy run on it. Hopefully it performs to its full potential. I have not actually ran this thing out. I haven't floored it. I haven't ran it through all the gears. I mean, I've ran it down the highway plenty and all that, but hopefully it performs the way I hope it does. And after I do a draggy run, I'll post the info on price, on MPG, on stuff like that. I might do a little clip of it driving around, but let's go see what it does. Demonstration on how hard it is to get out of park. So every time it wants to skip past reverse and neutral, so I kind of got to go back, make sure, okay, there's reverse, neutral. Oh, there's drive, hold on. There's reverse, neutral, drive. So it's a little bit finicky, and obviously the indicator does not line up, so you have to make sure you're in drive, not in third gear or something like that. But not terrible, but I definitely want to revise that. And this thing does have a little bit higher stall converter in it. Medium acceleration. All right, just did the draggy run. Wasn't as good data wise as I thought it was going to be, but it felt great, felt better. It was better, just not as much better as I thought it was going to be. I'll put up the results. Either before or after this clip, let you look at it. On the run I just did with the LS, probably could have been better. I definitely could have loaded up on the converter and all that, but I wanted the test to be the same as it was when I did it stock. And with stock, from a dead stop, I just floored it. I think it was a little over a second better in the quarter mile, almost 3 seconds faster, I think, 0 to 60, which again it felt great, felt good. It's not a race car, but it also has 355 rear gears, 32-inch tall tires. Again, not a race car. It's pretty heavy, whatever. I just wanted it to feel better, and it does. So how much did it cost me? This is not an exact number. There's a lot of little stuff I bought, a lot of little fittings and this and blah, blah, blah. I kind of just tried to add a number I thought was good for all that miscellaneous stuff, but realistically, this swap cost me about $5,000. And I got a pretty good deal on the trans. The engine was also a pretty good deal considering it was rebuilt. So I didn't include stuff like the alternator that I had went out. I had a spare sitting in the garage from an old LS swap, so I didn't have to buy one. I didn't include the price of the injectors, of having to get injectors and stuff like that. But this was just a base price. It cost me about roughly $5,000 to swap this. And of course, I can still sell my old engine and transmission and recoup some money, but $5 grand is about what it cost me to get this thing, buy everything and put it into the vehicle. And as far as the power wise, that's the draggy video. You'll see, about what it does. To add to that, on the highway, this thing is 100 times better on the highway. It has way more passing power. With the old setup on the highway, if I was cruising 75, 80 and I wanted to pass somebody, I would really, if I really wanted to pass somebody, I'd have to stab the throttle and get it to kick down a gear, and it would barely climb in mile per hour. It still would do, I don't know. I've never tried to top it out, but I've done 90 plus with the old setup. It's not like it can't do it. It just takes longer to do it. It takes more effort to do it. With this LS, it doesn't even leave overdrive. The converter doesn't even unlock, and I can pass people on the highway doing 80. So it's a lot better on the highway. It feels a lot better. And that brings us to gas mileage. So I didn't do an extensive test with this, but with the previous setup, I drove from work to home one day, filled up, got home, filled up again, tested it. I did about the same, about 80, 85 on the highway, same run, about 40 miles. And with the old setup, I got 11 miles per gallon. With the LS, it got 18 and a half, which I was kind of shocked because that was better than I thought for a cammed LS, in this decently heavy brick-shaped vehicle. But that puts me at 18 and a half miles per gallon. That's considering I was all highway. With a 33-gallon tank, that puts me at about 600 miles range on this thing versus, almost half before, before a little over 300 before. So way better range, way better gas mileage. This thing is tuned on 87 octane. I did not get it tuned on 93 octane, which would obviously get me more power and stuff like that. I don't want it to be a race car. I'm not trying to make it as fast as possible. I still wanted to be able to put 87 in it and not have to pay for premium and all that BS. With the LS versus the small block Ford setup that was in it, the LS is a lot easier to work on. And they're both push rod V8s. It's not very complex to work on a small block Ford, but on the small block Ford setup, you don't have coil on plug, you have distributor, you have that big intake manifold that sits on top of the engine and hangs over the passenger side. So if you have to do something, get underneath that or get to the passenger valve cover, anything like that, it's a lot harder to access on the small block Ford. And also the tuning side of it, the LS stuff, you can get tunes for stuff anywhere, everywhere, for anything. The small block Ford stuff, there's not that much out there as far as accessing the tuning, as far as I know. I did a little bit of research. I can't speak on it 100%, but I didn't really find anything. So even if you were to say, well, I can take $5 grand, I can upgrade my small block Ford, and I can make it faster in a quarter mile, okay, fine. But how are you going to tune it? Who's going to tune it? Yeah, you can convert it to carburetor, sure, but you still probably aren't going to get the gas mileage, and it's still not going to be as good of a bang for buck as the LS stuff. Now, with that being said, because if you rebuild a small block Ford, this thing had 230,000 miles on it. You're gonna have to pull the engine, rebuild the entire engine, and by the time you're done doing all that, just trying to make a little bit extra power, I'm sure you'll spend over $5 grand. So, and then on top of it, the transmission wasn't in good shape and all that stuff. So there's a lot more into it. Based on all the things I analyzed when I went through this whole swap process, the LS was the best bang for the buck, the cheapest, the most powerful, all that stuff. That being said, as far as LS swaps go, especially with the Gen 3 LS, the early LSs, you know, whatever they started in like late 90s, like 98 or 2000, whatever it was. This swap has kind of made me realize something. I think the days of going to the junkyard and grabbing the cheapest LS you can, throwing it in something and going to town are kind of over, because all the parts that are on these LSs are now 20 years old or a little bit less, a little bit more, whatever. Like in my case, the injectors were clogged up. I had to get new injectors. The alternator went out. And then too, my setup had some newer parts on it already, but you know, you got to think about water pumps and, you know, spark plugs and spark plug wires and coil packs, and all this stuff is so old now to where if you buy a junkyard LS, let's say a Gen 3, and you grab it for some cheap price and you think it's great, you get home, you open it up, and it's got, you know, it needs a bunch of parts. It needs a new alternator, it needs a new starter, it needs push rods, it needs, you know, whatever else. And of course, all the cam bearings are bad on all these LSs too. So you're getting to the point where that old thought process of I'm going to go grab a $300 LS engine, throw it in something and go, is kind of dying down because of the age of all the parts. And then, you know, obviously the neglect people neglect these vehicles and don't change oil and don't do all that. But in my opinion, the days of that are kind of gone. Now you can get a newer LS, you know, you can get something out of a, you know, later model Chevy truck or whatever, fine. But the days of the old grab a $300 engine and go are kind of coming to an end, unless you already plan on replacing heads and replacing all that stuff for a race application or something like that. But as far as just dropping something in a daily driver, because that first 4.8 LS we pulled apart, I mean, it was basically cooked. So I mean, it would needed a full rebuild and all that stuff. So all that being said, I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. Probably not, but I'll remember it later and then it'll be too late. Overall, I'm happy with the swap. It runs and drives like I wanted it to. It makes power. It gets good gas mileage. It didn't break the bank. Would a Coyote be better? Absolutely, but it would have cost me way more. So that's going to be it for now. I will have some more Bronco updates coming because I have to do all the suspension on it. I have to do the brakes on it. I'm going to do some headlight stuff because these headlights are junk. And if you subscribe for OBS stuff, I got some more OBS stuff coming. Also, hopefully in the next, next few weeks I get after the Ranger again. If you're an old Ranger follower for the EcoBoost stuff, I got that, something coming up for that. Hopefully I get that squared away, maybe, I don't know. But the projects never end. I did get the swap done. I'm happy I have my daily driver back. Still need to get AC going, all that nonsense. Still need to get four-wheel drive, but for now it runs and drives and I'm semi-happy with the whole setup. I just need to keep picking away at little stuff that I didn't initially clean up, and we'll get this thing squared away, and it's going to be the best daily driver ever.